Black Ops 6 Season 2 was an interesting one in the sense that there was this big anticipation that it would fix a ton of the problems with the game's experiences across multiplayer, zombies, and Warzone. On paper, it provided a bunch of different and welcome changes to the game on top of the content, so much so to the point that Warzone's main marketing this season was fixes with minimal content. Beyond the shared events coming, the only things detailed for Warzone on the roadmap were 2 perks in terms of content, legitimately just 2 items. But then the update came, and for many, it wasn't exactly what they were hoping to see. So today I wanted to give my perspective here and a bit of an initial review so far of the season. So to begin, I think that we do need to mention that there's still a lot of things that did not get fixed. Fixes that were on paper, but in-game not so much. Things like the Prestige Master congratulations screen. This was one of the first things I saw in our update video the other day. Not quite sure how that's seemingly a relatively simple thing to check to see if it was fixed or not, and then amend the patch notes accordingly, but it seems like it's hit or miss. I know that it was fixed for me. I have not had this issue since, but I also have seen so many other people saying that it still persists for them. To my knowledge, the fix of plugging in a mouse and dismissing it is a way that fixes it. That did it for me in Season 1 before it came back, I think in the Squid Games event update, so that should hopefully work again in Season 2, but still, again, big picture, not fixed for everybody. Challenge tracking is implemented, but not a very intuitive experience. It only shows one of your track challenges and not exactly something you'd cycle through either, and it almost renders the feature pointless. I think you should have the ability to vertically see all 10 listed in menu or in game, or at the very least, the ability to cycle through to see which challenge you want to look at on that widget at any given time. The combat record doesn't appear to be tracking properly since the update. Medals continue not to track. That was something that was not tracking certain medals all throughout Season 1. There's visual bugs with ranks on your friends list, and oh, that's a big one as well. You can't join friends or parties with that being broken because of a, air quote, different game version, which is unbearably frustrating. The perk Greed, that 4th perk, is removed from all loadouts if you jump in for the first time after the update. Reticle displays and menus are bugged. Split screen is broken, kicking players out of the game. Packet bursting still goes crazy. I personally lost about 40 FPS across the board after the update on PC. Not sure if that was just like a blanket reset of a bunch of settings, but I had to go back in and change a bunch of things. There's a bunch of stuff that was also listed in regards to acknowledged issues, more so on the Warzone side of things here, because I think that in terms of disappointment, Warzone's probably the one that leads the pack here with that, but there's a lot of other things that came along with it. For multiplayer, in terms of overall feeling of the season, it feels like it was a nice addition, but nothing crazy. For multiplayer, I wasn't expecting a whole massive innovation on feel or anything from season to season. And I think for the most part, it just feels like more of Season 1. Not necessarily in a good or bad way. I think it was just more of, hey, here's more content, stuff you can play through, and we'll see in a bit for the next seasonal update. I don't think inherently that's as bad a thing as some of the other experiences are having at the moment. I almost feel like I need to preface that, honestly, I'm not having a bad time in MP. Hell, I was actually having a good time that I was finally able to finish 100%er in multiplayer, and I'm just now focused on things like badges, dark ops, and other things that are just minuscule and probably stuff that I only care about that might not affect the interest of other players. So for me, maybe I'm just off in my own little world doing my own thing, having fun with that, and it's a good time to me that I'm not necessarily losing my mind over this season. Maybe I'm just too hyper-focused on a few things that I'm too close to see the bigger picture, where I need to stop going for these specific things to see the larger picture as a whole. But for me, it's been more of the same, but that's not exactly bad. I think for a lot of the issues I was having with multiplayer, it fixed more than it introduced, perhaps. Anyways, content. Bounty, I found, was pretty aesthetically cool. The ability to jump from the light fixtures is a nifty idea. I think it's an odd amount of vertical variance for the map overall. And I'm also convinced someone at Treyarch is just in love with vents, as evidenced by another one in this map and in Dealership, but I think flow-wise, it's pretty easy to predict and pretty easy to learn, so it makes for a decent gameplay experience. Is it the best map in the game? I don't think so, but is it the worst? Absolutely not. Dealership seems fine to me. Again, don't love it, don't hate it. It does have some really interesting lanes of movement, though. I feel like there's a lot of side angles of approach, where there's more areas where you could have 4 different angles of engagement than most maps, which is interesting, but it feels like it was good in 10v10, or at least I think I played it in 10v10. Maybe it's just all blurred together for me, but wasn't bad, but again, also kind of a middle of the pack map for me. Lifeline was crazy hectic, incredibly claustrophobic, and more of a tug-of-war style map for the sort of face-off experience. It's for some people, not for others. I think this could be a good camo grindy map, but I still think that Stakeout will be the go-to here for this, but it's definitely nice if you want another one added into that rotation if you're playing face-off as a mosh pit mode and not necessarily just going to stake out 24/7. Adds more of that chaos in a more sort of condensed fashion. But anyways, weaponry, the PPSH, a lot of fun, good to use. Bullet hose though, so take some time to get the attachments that you want to end up using to make it viable in most situations. The Cypher was very hit or miss for me. I feel like some games I felt like I was absolutely frying with it, and others it was just a pea shooter. But it's good if you have a build for mobility and handling. Pretty solid, but I'd still say, hey, the Aimzer XM4 outclasses it, but it could be something fun to use if you're looking to use something different. And then the Fang LMG is one that I liked, but also I don't know how much I'm gonna use it. I don't use the LMGs too much in multiplayer in particular, and I'm not a huge fan of the pre-fire or open bolt delay, whatever it ends up having, where it makes me second guess using it. I think my favorite part of the weapon is the camo that comes along from the specials, the Blood Fang camo, which is, as a special, partially animated and looks sick, plus has variations for zombies and Warzone you can unlock, so like, that's pretty cool. Still not a fan of things being event rewards though. Like, I feel like having the TR2 coming as an event reward, having a new perk of Slipstream as an event reward as well, not necessarily such a big fan of that kind of stuff. And I think that it kind of comes down to what we talked about before a couple of weeks ago, where I think why I enjoyed Modern Warfare 3's events last year was that it had optional content. It didn't necessarily like force me to play, that if I didn't want to go for a camo or something like that, I didn't have to, but it was something that was an optional thing that I found worthy enough of that playtime to actually go out and do it. Whereas putting like a weapon or a perk behind that limited time event feels like more of a less genuine way to introduce said content. Even though it does go to the armory afterwards that you don't miss out on anything, it feels like it's more artificially getting you to engage with said content during that time than if it was an optional item. But anyways, that's me. Zombies, this admittedly, while making this review, I don't have as much hands-on time as I'd like, but I've watched a lot from the sidelines while working on other content, and it seems like there just may have been a bit of a larger expectation for what was coming. I mean, Citadel Moore was a ton of fun, a massive experience that offered a whole ton to explore, side Easter eggs and quests like that, and seemingly progress the story in a very meaningful way. Whereas this, with the Tomb, it seemed like a lot of people were expecting Origins 2, the return of the staff, or hopefully the return, maybe in a secret capacity, of all 4 staves, sizing of the map being larger, though with sizing I feel like Treyarch was actually pretty upfront about the map sizing in the 115-day blog post for the Tomb, where they said they crafted the Tomb to provide an experience similar to Liberty Falls. So for that, I mean, that I feel like is less of a gripe per se, but the Easter egg and cutscenes and everything, that I absolutely feel like was a reason to be disappointed by. The nature of the day 1 boss fight obviously was not ideal, but then outside of that, the cutscene that you end up getting, the Sam AI discussion, just kind of felt soulless, offering no real deeper connection in terms of building relationships with the characters or with the story. The one common criticism I felt was that it felt like it was the sort of cutscene that you'd see between campaign missions. And that's a great way to put it, I think, because it kind of tells you what's going on, but it also doesn't pull you in enough because it almost assumes like you're just playing this in a linear fashion. Like, we're not going to have a 2 to 3 month wait before our next introduction here, which is what I'd guess the next thing we see for zombies would probably be season 4. So for that, I absolutely understand where it was lackluster. Now, whether it be because of the contract disputes and departures of voice actors or anything of those prevailing theories, it was something that did not even remotely have close to a grand payoff of an Easter egg. Though, if it is in relation to contract disputes for AI clauses or whatever the case, that could very well explain why we also didn't see any intro cutscene this time around. No intro, minimal outro. It's not boding well for the future perhaps, though I'm not expecting again anything until at least season 4. So maybe there's time to make that up, because next season I think will almost exclusively be reserved for the marketing of Verdansk on the COD side of things, which, speaking of, Warzone, well, the overall feeling that I've seen here out of this is that you can't really tell there's a new season unless you knew there was a new season. And honestly, I think that's a very valid criticism, or I guess blanket statement, because there's not really a whole ton to criticize when you're talking about content not being added in. Like, we have 2 items being added in those 2 perks that, well, I mean, what else is there more to say? It's the same old, same old. And realistically, a lot of the issues still persisted. A lot more issues even came up after the season 2 update. And honestly, I think when I look at the sort of situation as a whole, it's due in part because it seems like every year they're trying to reinvent the wheel with Warzone. The unfortunate part is that this entire scenario is just deja vu, what we've had Season 1 and Season 2. I mean, how many times have we seen this scenario happen since Warzone launched? Almost every single integration has created some major issues. Cold War, the different engines from Cold War to Modern Warfare 2019, created some gameplay feeling issues, and then also the insane imbalance of that first time integration. The DMR and the burst metas were insane. In Vanguard, Caldera straight up broke the game along with some minor engine tweaks, where that was the sort of first DEF CON 1 event within the Warzone experience where for literally weeks to a month, players' games were not just like buggy, but straight up broken. Modern Warfare 2, for all intents and purposes, did not break the game per se because it was a fresh start and built off of the Modern Warfare 2 Warzone 2.0 experience, but as the new baseline, it kind of took like 30 steps in the wrong direction for gameplay pace, play, and feel compared to what Warzone was up until that point. Modern Warfare 3 might have been the only one to my recollection that didn't really entirely break the experience, but also it was a very bland introduction from my recollection. Like, not as much blockbuster stuff happening at that integration, just a new sort of map and a slight adjustment to the movement settings and everything. Also, the 2-tap meta at that point was definitely still something that came back and was very annoying. And then Black Ops 6, you have all the problems persisting now that we've seen. It's just kind of crazy that after 4 integrations and a fresh start, we still see these things happening. I know the call has been make Warzone its own game and just add weapons in every year, and I definitely think that that could be the way forward in correcting all of this, because you have all these changeovers to try and match the existing game in that sort of flagship offering year over year. The problem is, though, is that I don't think that that will ever happen because Warzone's main point of existence is to be a conduit to premium game sales, to facilitate more game purchases of, hey, here's what our game is like. It's a taste of the offering, but if you want more of the traditional multiplayer, a third mode, a campaign, oh, and by the way, it's great to rank up your weapons if you want to use them in Warzone, this is what you want to buy. That's the entire existence of Warzone, and while yes, it can provide a different gameplay experience in a battle royale, that's the whole reason why it's free to play and why it is a sort of marketing tool for the bigger games at large. The problem with Warzone that has been and still is that every single year they're trying to reinvent the wheel in some capacity. We talked about recently about how development has that sometimes crossover period that just doesn't warrant the features the time to be added in so that they're there from the very beginning. The prime example of this was the challenge tracking we talked about. Challenge tracking in Modern Warfare 3 was a phenomenal thing offered in terms of quality of life. Absolutely love that. One of my favorite sort of quality of life features in the last couple of years. But it was added in with Season 2 of Modern Warfare 3, which at that point, Treyarch and Black Ops 6 were just about sort of on the precipice of being revealed, and they were getting a build ready for showing off, and of course then later on in the year for the multiplayer reveal, the beta, and so on and so forth. So that in that last year is all crunch time. So that kind of stuff has the unfortunate crossover where, yeah, we didn't have it at launch, but it came at Season 2. But that also translates to Warzone, because those quality of life fixes, the directions in which the game was corrected from Season 3 onward, well, that kind of gets all thrown out the window because the vision for what the next year of Warzone is being worked on as of right now. A combination of too many cooks in the kitchen with different studios and different visions for the game coming all together for this sort of group project that is Warzone, and then too many overlapping ideas that things get lost in translation. It severely cuts the lifespan of the game annually with this, where I can kind of expect that every Season 3 or so, Season 4 maybe at the latest, you're going to have a version of the game that's like actually pretty well polished, fun to play, has some good quality of life additions, and they're only going to be making it better as they go into those following seasons. But before you know it, you're already at the launch of the next game and you're like, oh God, we have to have this whole sort of broken scenario over and over again for the next 1 to 2 to 3 seasons. So you kind of cut that playtime in half. So that to me is where Warzone was and still is looking at it, and is a big reason why I've stopped playing in the last year or so here at this. I think that Season 2, though, as a whole was kind of always going to be this filler when we look at the bigger picture here at this. I mean, look at the time left on the Battle Pass. This season will be our shortest yet of Black Ops 6, and maybe one of the shortest, if not the shortest, we've seen in recent years. Off the top of my head, I can't remember the sort of lowest that we've seen in terms of time frames for a season, but it's definitely something that is going to be a very short season by comparison. It's going to take us until March 20th, which is less than 2 months away. Content-wise for multiplayer, I think it's a fine update. Again, nothing massive to be excited about, but also nothing that really detracts from the overall experience. If you're having a fun time with multiplayer, you're probably still having a fun time with multiplayer. Zombies, I get that it definitely feels rushed, and especially by comparison to Citadel Day More or the Terminus stuff that we had here at this, it might not seem like the overarching larger package that you may have come to expect. And I definitely understand that critique. Warzone, I feel like this entire season was just from the get-go going to be fixing the game or spending a season prepping for Verdansk. This very much so feels like the calm before the storm in that sense, but the thing is, I'm not expecting this storm that's upcoming to really rock the boat or rock much life back into the game, which I'd love to be wrong about. I'm not necessarily playing Warzone too much, but for those that do, I'd love for you guys to have an awesome experience that is fun to play, that's enjoyable for all. But for now, it's been an interesting one that, for me personally speaking, I haven't had too much an issue with, just because, again, I'm hyper fixated on doing things in multiplayer, but overall, it's kind of seemingly a filler season. So let me know your thoughts down below. What do you think of this? Like the season so far? Frustrated with some of the bugs and issues that still persist? Not liking it at all? Whatever the case, drop your thoughts down below. But if you enjoyed the video, you found it at all insightful, do me a favor and drop a like on it. And if you're new to the channel, make sure you subscribe so don't miss a single thing regarding all things Black Ops 6 as we gear up for the rest of Season 2 here. I do have a lot of stuff that I'm very excited to share with you guys here over the coming days to weeks, but just wanted to give you guys my thoughts and opinions here, initially at least, on Season 2. Hopefully it can get a little bit better for those that are having issues with it. But that said, let me know your thoughts, drop a like, subscribe if you guys are new, and I'll see you later. Take care, and peace.